Welcome, my friends. I am Rick, and this is your seat at the table, and we are talking all things BattleTech. One of the great houses, and perhaps one of the unspoken stories in current BattleTech history, has to do with the RimWorld's Republic, or Amaris's home systems. This one periphery state was sufficiently capable of producing, fielding, and executing one of the greatest invasions and some to a limited success uh, rewriting of the history books than any other organization in the BattleTech universe. The RimWorlds, unlike all the other periphery states that still survive as a 3025. RimWorlds are long defunct and disbanded, dispersed. Some are abandoned. Many of the worlds have been absorbed by the Lyran Commonwealth. As a matter of fact, one of the things that may have made it into some of the Lyran Commonwealth history books that we have is just how much of the industrial might and power of the RimWorld's Republic survived and augmented the existing resources and manufacturing power of the Lyran Commonwealth, basically doubling it down. This is one of those unspoken dirty secrets as to why the Lyrans are such a powerhouse when it comes to manufacturing goods and having a strong economy, is the fact that unlike most of their rivals, they absorbed another house in almost its entirety and majority of its heavy industry worlds are now and have been under the control of the Lyrans since the end of the the beginning of the Succession Wars, right? The end of the Star League. So we're going to be kind of cutting in and out, and jumping back and forth a little bit. I also printed out the notes and stuff from that's been compiled in Sarnanet, so you can easily go to Sarnanet and look up RimWorlds, and you'll find this entry here. And we're going to tap into that too, because I'm trying to give us an overview of the house that was and how some of its impact is still felt in the current game world. Let's see. So the birth of RimWorld's Republic, basically, case point was Hector Worthington Rowe, an undergraduate student of the classics of history at University of Thebes on Alexandria. Rowe was a genuine patriot, surprised himself and his classmates for volunteering to defend Alexandria against the Alliance assaults in 2237. As a sergeant in Renfield's 3rd Alexandria Militia, Rowe defended his beloved university against elements of the 14th and 29th Alliance Special Combat Battalions. 4-month siege was over. Alexandria militia had lost over 3,000 troops, and the Terrans even more, etc., etc. Like so many veterans of past wars, Rowe could not adjust to the broken remnants of his post-war existence. Indeed, his wartime experiences completely changed his perspective. Rowe and many of his embittered fellow Alexandrians were searching for a way to pay back the Alliance for its destruction visited on their homeland. Fortunately, what he learned from his incomplete study of the classic focused less on the nobility and courage of the ancients and more on the duplicity and cruelty, etc., etc. 2239, Rowe formed a quasi-political club to instill Alexandrians in rabid patriotism, profound hatreds of the Alliance. This would be the Terran Alliance, the predecessor of or precursor of the Star League. It goes on. Realizing he and his followers would be hunted mercilessly, Rowe decided against returning to Alexandria after giving the remaining Sky merchantmen an option of making their fortunes beyond the stars or dying with the remainder of the Lucanan garrison. Rowe stripped the garrison of its weapons, its stores, and jumped out of the system. First, however, he watched the last of the fusiliers burn at the stake. Guy was a piece of work. This be Amaris's not Amaris's ancestor, but Rim just sets the tone. Where go the house, Lord goes the house. Goes on, it goes on. raiding a few places along the way. Fringe worlds for food, spare parts, livestock, and women. Roe set course for deep space. His pirate squadron eventually disappeared into the heart of the dark nebula. Arriving safely on the other side, he discovered a small G5 star with a single habitable world inhabited it. He named the new world Apollo, officially proclaimed the Rim World's Republic on September 8, 2250, some 67 years before the founding of the Federated Suns. Roe modeled his new homeland in his own work interpretation of Plato, his favorite classical author. Women who he'd ripped from their families on Lucretia were given the option of citizenship in Roe Republic by contracting marriages with Roe's henchmen, or being demoted to servitor status for use as cheap labor. Recognizing the need to preserve what little technology they had, Roe further decreed individuals possessing scientific or technical skills to be exempt from mundane tasks so they might concentrate on more important duties. Despite the manners of its conception, Roe's Republic not only survived its initial years of hardship, but also thrived in years to come. It goes on about Roe himself was not so hot. His ending was not so well. And we go Mishka's diplomacy from 2340 to 2371. Arabella Roe transformed her father's backwater republic into a thriving, viable league of proudly defined citizens. She refused to commit to people's technology to create a spacefaring navy. This might provoke undue concern from the Lyran Commonwealth fleet commanders. Concentrating on matters closer to home, the first consul set her sights on establishing a well-trained army instead. Expanding slowly outward, Arabella acquired star systems of Barcelona, Black Earth, Beta 7, and Malibu. These planets were converted into, quote, hedgehogs, that is, giant fortified fire bases designed to slow the advances of any aggressor and make him pay dearly for every planet he took. On the home front, the enfranchisement and subsequent education of thousands of helots provide the Republic with a pool of technicians, scientists, and warriors devoted to the cause of Republic independence. By the time of Arabella Roe's death in 2376, Rimworld's Republic changed from being a violent backwater boondock to becoming a practical working state closely resembling 18th century Terran France. It remained for her son, Michael Edward Durant, to use these strengths to the best of his advantages. Right. So on and so forth. Michael Mishka Durant would continue his mother's policies of cautious expansion and Periphery. He was a headstrong leader, decided to abandon the Republic's low profile in favor of a grandiose diplomatic initiative throughout half the inner sphere. It was certainly not necessary to announce the existence of a state to the leaders of the Lyran Commonwealth, the Draconis Combine, or even the distant Terran hegemony, but none of the great houses could accept the claims put forth by Durant's emissaries. His diplomats asserted the Rimworld's Republic consisted of 23 inhabited star systems, over 12 billion citizens, and 2 million soldiers. Whether or not such claims were pure bravo, or the House leaders realized even if it were even only half truth, they had greatly underestimated a potentially powerful ally and or rival. Though poor in natural resources, the Republic could offer hundreds of thousands of skilled workers capable of manufacturing large quantities of goods at dirt cheap prices. It mattered little to the ex-helot on the assembly line if he'd made what he made and at what price, as long as his standard of living remained sufficiently high. Despite the enormous distances involved in transport, the Rimworlds could manufacture for the states of the inner sphere much cheaper than they could do it themselves. In exchange for these economic benefits, Lord Durant gained what he believed his people needed most of all: recognition and access to up-to-date technology, especially military technology. Nevertheless, short-term gains that Durant's policies produced would yield long-term liabilities for his descendants. Bring us into the Age of War. First, Amaris. The Age of War involved the inner sphere. The combatants learned the true measure of the Rimworld's Republic under House Durant. 2407, when the Draconis Combine attacked the Lyran provinces of Skye and Tamar, both sides immediately approached the Rim Republic with offers of alliance. Finding neither the pro-offered deal sweet enough, Michael Durant's sister Heather Durant, the fifth first consul of the Republic, persistently rejected all requests for aid in favor of official neutrality. As the war between the Commonwealth and the Combine spread, numerous rim worlds became a scene of clandestine war between intelligence agencies from both sides. In this, Heather Durant encouraged the Republican duplicity by forming an intelligence service of her own, the ASROC, to acquire and profit from the transmission of military secrets to the highest bidder. Republicans were not above contributing covertly to one side or another when the price was right. In exchange for several Commonwealth star systems, the Republic commissioned the ASROC to supply a clandestine effort support group to the Lyran military. ASROC was subsequently involved in the famous Lyran Operation Prometheus raid on Terran hegemony world of Hesperus II, which netted the Lyrans the Rim worlds and their first blueprints of the new battle mechs. Goes on and on. February 2448, attempt was made on the life of Lord Jacob Cameron, Director General of the Terran Hegemony. Although the poisoning failed and the Terrans blacked out the news of the attempt, Hegemony agents implemented a widespread search for the culprits. In charge of the investigation was a young Hegemony counselor named Lori Tennis Amaris. Though the would-be assassins were never apprehended, Amaris herself uncovered Republican passports in homes of several intelligence operatives suspected in being in the pay of House Creta. Though a direct link between House Creta and the Republic was never established, Amaris decided to turn this evidence to her own advantage as leverage with the government there. Amaris traveled to the new capital of the Republic on Apollo as a part of a twofold mission. Her husband, David Chai Wong, had been appointed new Terran ambassador to Rim Worlds, and Lady Terrans herself was dispatched to engage in high-level espionage as part of her ongoing intelligence investigation attempt on Lord Cameron's life. During this diplomatic reception, where Lord Wong was presented his credentials, Amaris first met Lady Heather Durant in early 2451. Exactly what transpired between them has never been proven, but there's strong evidence to indicate the two became lovers. Lady Terrans then married Lord Wong 3 years earlier and legally adopted his 2 children by a previous marriage. In a gesture symbolizing their equality in marriage, the couple agreed that these first two children would keep the surname Wong, that any offspring from their union would bear their mother's maiden name. Later, the Wongs and the Amarises became Rin World citizens, where they became established among the higher-ranking nobles of the Republic. It's not known if anything Amaris was able to discover regarding the poisoning of Lord Cameron. The main important is that she established her family line, and eventually their line takes over the Rim World's Republic. The Maglada affair. Star League politicians were hard-pressed to formulate clear and concise policy applicable to all the periphery states. The Rimworld's Republic was nominally occupied territory, although it was a hereditary possession of House Amaris since 2488. Its policies reflected the whims of Gregory Amaris more than the interests of the Star League. Ian Cameron, Director General of the Terran Hegemony and the First Lord of the Star League, viewed the Outworld's alliance as more as a collection of woolly crazies than as a political or social organization to be taken seriously, much to their despair many years later. This goes to show you that there was some hubris and arrogance on part of the Inner Sphere leadership, who constantly looked down their nose when they bothered to notice at all these outer periphery states, and just how effective and wealthy or capable that they were, instead of continually trying to paint them into a picture of some backwater Hickville. He goes on about the rebellion in the Rim. All right, goes on. And we have the Concat War. We get to the actual reunification war. The Rim kind of caves in pretty quick. It doesn't go after in the major conflict because they've got a longer view plan going on, and the Amarises have. When you go back to the Durant, starting with the Durants and then the Amarises, wanted to make sure that they had a very potent and capable military organization to defend their turf, and one of the best ways to keep something like that going is to not go around bragging about it. Said here, Gregory Amaris, Lord of the Rimworld's Republic, thought the worst was over when the fervor for his universal act of loyalty died down. Having secured position with Ian Cameron, Amaris passed a series of tax measures to rejuvenate the Rimworld's economy. These policies, Amaris hoped to cement its position in Periphery with an eye towards financing a state capable of challenging the great houses of the inner sphere. The average citizen might have shouldered the burden of taxation with little complaint, were it not for Amaris's stupidity in implementing his economic vision. Through a variety of economic inducements, Amaris attracted athletic technicians and industrials to the Republic to fill high-paying jobs that could have gone just as easily to Republicans' citizens. In addition to whatever particular site for a new production or research facility was needed, Amaris used his interpretation of eminent domain to, quote, acquire the needed property with little or no compensation to the owner. So you step on your people, eventually your people shoot you. After continually alienating its citizens in these ways, Amaris made his most colossal blunder. Knowing he must pay lip service to Star League, he supported Ian Cameron's Pollock's proclamation wholeheartedly, for it was too soon for him to take on the mighty League. Amaris was, nevertheless, determined to use the declaration to his own advantage. Simultaneously, to public support the proclamation, he announced the Manchester Directive, which outlawed membership in the Republican Army. This group which had been reduced to an honorary society by ex-soldiers and descendants of soldiers, was the last link to Rimworld's Republic of the days before the ascension of House Amaris. Ironically, it was the Manchester Directive, even more than the Pollock's proclamation, that drove the Republicans to rebel. Most citizens saw membership in the RRA as a point of honor from one generation to the next. Moreover, the indiscriminate use of the Amaris regulars to seize suspected RRA meeting halls and to arrest without due process of law anyone suspected of belonging to the group convinced the Republicans to ignore the Cameron and Amaris's edicts. Okay, so one of those things we sit there and we talk. They talk about how savvy and how intelligent Amaris is, that before he takes over, he kills the Camerons and takes over the Starlight. About how he built this powerful industrial and war machine up, etc. Truth is, this thing had been in production for a couple hundred years, starting with the previous leaders of the Rim Republic, and continued by, enhanced by members of his own family. His family had been plotting something for generations. It just came to fruition under his watch. He was gifted with much of the resources and military that he utilizes against the Star League. Seeing the brutality of the enemy only fan to savage determination of rebel armies, not surprisingly, Star League's original 5-year plan for the conquest of the Rimworlds developed into a 10-year plan, then became a 15-year plan. 8 years into the war, only a third of the Rimworld publics had fallen to the invaders. Yeah, they give them a run for their money. There's no getting around that. So September 2596, representatives of the Rim provisional government surrendered unconditionally to the officers of the Star League military. With the rebellion over and its government secured, Gregory Amaris began reestablishing his power base in the Rim. Amaris politics. After ruling on Iron Hand for 15 years, Richard Amaris died of brain fever in 2619. His daughter Amanda was sworn in as president the following day. In her first speech to the Republic, she announced her intentions of restoring democratic elections no later than 2621. Before she could make good her promise, Amanda was assassinated in 2620 in a botched palace coup. When a renegade detachment of home guards sprayed machine gun fire all over the palace, Willard Amaris, Amanda's cousin and instigator of the coup, was killed in the confusion. When the shooting finally stopped, the person next in line for the presidency, Amanda's brother Jeffrey, stepped in to restore order. His first action was to pledge to carry out his sister's reforms. A lot of politics going on. A lot of politics. The root of the Amaris crisis. Beginning of the 28th century, the peace imposed by Star League seemed inviolate. With new colony worlds being settled every month, new scientific advances improving the welfare of League citizens, a new social stability emerged along with a wide variety of opportunities for advancement. Under the direction of Simon Cameron, the First Lord of the Star League, humanity was experiencing a golden age. Like any other shining reality, however, this one had its shadow. It's not only simply the prejudice and avarice of the Star League Council members that destroyed the era of peace, but the willingness of one man to sacrifice the welfare of his subjects in a selfish bid for personal power. His ruthlessness and lack of compassion represent the dark side of humanity's dual nature, and that man was the sixth ruler of the Rimworld's Republic, Stephen Amaris. And the Amarises never abandoned their dream of a private empire beyond the inner sphere. More to the point, they never renounced their private claims to superiority over any other ruling house in known space. While paying lip service to the First Lords, Amaris clan secretly resented the position of power and power of the Camerons. The very fact that Amarises had been unable to keep the peace in their own backyard had been forced to call upon House Cameron to save their own hides, generating an abiding hatred of everything Cameron. Michael Cameron's insistence the Amarises dismantle their new BattleTech ranges was seen as a perfect proof of the Camerons' betrayal. Behind the smiling faces and dutiful posturings, the Amaris clan plotted, planned, and waited for their prey with the patience of a spider. Alert for any weakness, they knew the time would come when they could exploit their advantages. Giving to that the remarkable thing that is not that the Amaris crisis should come, but it came as late as it did. Right. And then we're leading us up into what's well known as the attempt at Stephen's seduction of and then destruction of the Star League court. So at that point, Kerensky's forces rally and attack into the Rim Worlds. They conquer it and basically becomes a fiat of the SLDF as a base of operations for further to retake Terra. And at the fall, after they succeed in taking Terra, Kerensky is removed from, quote, head of the SDLF, and the Star League is disbanded. So at this point, some 270 worlds. It's established that the Rimworld's Republic at its height had roughly 270 worlds available to it. The house simply disintegrates. It ceases to exist. In the mad dash to claim territory after when the Star League Defense Force, the SLDF, packs up and begins its exodus. It's on like Donkey Kong. Everybody's in for what they can grab, and the signers are no different. The Lyran Commonwealth gobbles up a lion's share of those periphery worlds that were formerly part of the Rimworld's Republic. And many of these are heavily industrialized, resource-rich, full of well-trained, well-maintained equipment, well-trained individuals, and a fairly prosperous society or public. So it just enhances and enriches the Lyran Commonwealth as a whole. A lot of its outer territories along the periphery border, once upon a time, were Rimworld's members of the Rimworld's Republic. After the fall of the Star League, and considering the tragedies and the terrible actions that Stephen Amaris and his people had propagated on the Inner Sphere and on the hegemony specifically, a lot of the Rimworld's Republic rank and file, the public, were appalled and shocked by what they were being told about how their leadership had acted in handling what it did. And so they were in denial, a big portion of them. And since then there's very little or no stories of any resurgent Amaris hidden cabals or organizations of RimWorld Republic people who wanted to see the restoration of the RimWorld's Republic at the expense of the Lyran Commonwealth. They were so utterly defeated by the SDLF and by Amaris's actions that they basically were more than willing to drink Kool-Aid, to deny ever being a member of the RimWorld, and quietly, if not quote meekly, become Lyran subjects in everything but name. So when we look at what was compiled here for the Sarnanet. This thing likes to pop off if I don't push it once in a while. And we already talked about this. 2037, missing out to reach the Republic. Already kind of covered that. So a lot of this is just gleaned from the stuff I just read from the source book for the Periphery. Expansion, rather than using great force, RimWorld's Republic extended by guile and seduction. Maxwell Rowell discovered the refugee colonies on its border in 2334. The Republic used trade agreements as well as shared ventures to improve education infrastructure to integrate the Republic with its neighbors. Such agreements did not halt Republican colonization efforts, and by 2338 the Republic had settled the worlds of Icar, Persistence, Winfield, Durf, Goddardam, Blackhawk, and Golandis. A chance hostile encounter with the Tamar Pact in 2331 turned the attentions of the Republic towards the inner sphere. Let's see the Amaris line. See, Heather and Durant maintained a careful policy of Republican neutrality, but profiteered from the Lyran-Carnarine conflict beginning in 2407. Although the Republic refused to back the Lyran Commonwealth, the Republic opened its borders to intelligence operators from both sides, established the Republican Intelligence Service, the ASROC. The Republican intelligence increased its influence in its territory and military through exchanges of information and special operatives. BattleTech technology gave the Republic a pair of key advantages. Every inner sphere power needed to build their army from scratch, and the Republic could practice and perfect battle mech tactics in their periphery holdings away from prying eyes. The Amaris line talks about the individual Amarises. Stefan the Usurper's birth. It's arguable that the House Amaris prepared for a coup for generations. The RimWorld's Republic sat poised for just an endeavor around 2750. Republic maintained a sizable army with a gigantic reserve, well-educated, trained population, and a large defense industry. Republicans had even penetrated every level of Star League administration. Stefan Amaris seized this opportunity. Stefan chose to foster a close relationship to the young knave selfish Richard Cameron, and we all know how that ended up. Right. Society. When Hector Rao founded the RimWorld's Republic, Apollo possessed an extremely small population. Only Roe's militants and slaves taken prisoner during Roe's flight were present. Roe dealt with this situation with pragmatism. Anyone with technical skill was allowed to practice trade. Female slaves could gain status by marriage. Everyone else was consigned to mundane labor or slavery. In spite of a small population, Apollo thrived. Commerce was also conducted in a most pragmatic manner. Goods and services, slaves were current Republic. Hector Rao's grandfather, Arbala, would later emancipate the Republican slaves altogether. The strife of the Exodus era inner sphere quickly alleviated the population problem. The Republic expanded as a flood of immigrants sought refuge in 2376, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so some of the obvious when we're talking about the RimWorld's Republic. Like I said, after the fall of the Star League, House Steiner basically absorbs 70% of the RimWorld's Republic worlds, expanding its pre-Star League borders considerably, gaining a lot of already heavily industrialized, heavily technologically advanced, well-trained citizens into its already upbeat, established economy and military and civilian structure. So this really enhances the Lyran Commonwealth. Like I said, none of their literature talks a lot about that era. It seems to they downplayed, the history is written by the victors kind of thing. Another thing that comes up, and it's been mentioned in one or two other source books, was that a lot of other worlds, of the other 30-odd% of the worlds, the rim worlds that cease to exist, many of them literally seem to the population just disappeared. They melted away, or they ceased. They died off. Or more strangely, it's suggested that perhaps, just like Apollo's mostly an abandoned world full of ruins. It's a great shame and, quote, a dark point in history, and so it's kind of shunned in a lot of ways. But during the mad, hectic couple of years prior to the exodus of the SLDF, a lot of things were going on out in the periphery that's never been completely explained or delved into. One of it is this translocation of a large percentage of population. It seems like entire world populations up and moved away, suddenly disappeared. Somebody with a lot of resource power to move people, pack these people up, and ship them somewhere else. There's no trails, no stories, no suggestions that these people were moved into the inner sphere or absorbed by neighboring periphery states. This leaves some unspoken conundrums. Did some of these people get shipped off by the Star League to become because the Star League Defense Force was going to be in desperate need of all kinds of labor and people knowledgeable in things like agriculture and civilian operations and civilian infrastructure and manufacturing, stuff that the soldiers and technicians of the SLDF were not trained or suited to do. So we know that part of the end of the Exodus, that there's a bunch of problems, and the forming of the clans comes out of the fact that you can't take the lion's share of these soldiers and turn them into farmers overnight and expect them to be happy about it. And we all know most of us know the history of how the clans developed and how that played out. But there's also this suggestion that they also brought some additional people with them. Back on the sheer numbers of jump ships and drop ships available to the Exodus that took place, I don't know that was the case. But there's nothing to suggest in the decades after, once Kerensky's people settled what is clan space, the possibility that perhaps some of these jump ships and drop ships were sent back to the periphery states, specifically the Outer Rim Worlds Republic areas where the SLDF still had a pretty potent presence, and to recover left material and resources that had been mothballed behind because they couldn't take all of it with them, to get more important necessary things that they didn't bring enough stuff with, and potentially manpower. It's just a possibility here. We just don't know. What we know, though, is that the Rimworld's Republic was a powerhouse, that it literally rivaled any one of the secondary houses in the inner sphere. And as I've said in my previous videos, that if you look at the individual houses, each individual house, while dominated by the Davions or the Cretans, or the Cretans or the Liaos, however you want to look at it, the houses themselves are actually made up of many smaller nation states, if you will, or smaller minor houses. And this is how this system is set up and operates and works. So if you take House Davion and you split it up, and the Hassocks have got a third of it, the Davions control a little bit more than a third of it, and the Sorenses create another, quote, third of it. So here's three minor houses, or two minor houses, that belong to and are rivals of the third, quote, bigger house, i.e. the Davions, who actually run the show. It's the same thing in all the other houses. So any one of these periphery states could easily match size-wise any one of these secondary houses and divisions within the various great houses. So the Rim Worlds itself was actually on the border of becoming a powerhouse equal to any of the great houses of the inner sphere. Size-wise, they were lacking maybe, they would be on the small side at 270 quote settled worlds, but that doesn't mean that another 30 to 50 would put them in running with House Karita in size, and House Liao in size. So when you talk about both size in territory and size in population and size in numbers of established accepted worlds, the fact that first the Durants and then later the Amarises continued this policy of secretly building up and reinforcing and improving their military for many generations shows that they had the foresight to look at the long game. They were playing a long game. And so when Stefan Amaris pulls his coup and he's able to transport the equivalent of 40 regiments of battle mechs plus support units from the Rim Worlds to the hegemony to supplement and take over for the more and more of the SLDF forces that were being sent to the Periphery to fight the other three Periphery powers. Because, like I said, the Rim Worlds fought a brief fight toward the reunification wars, but at some point they capitulated as a calculated political move on part of the Amarises. They realized that they're not going to win against the powerhouse of the SLDF and all the inner sphere houses combined, working in conjunction. And instead of completely being decimated and completely being destroyed and denuded, they surrendered. And in the process, they still manage to be overlooked or looked down upon by their new overlords, and B, manage to conceal or minimize this massive industrial war machine complex that exists and it was well established, and the fact that they shouldn't have, even after fighting the conflict they had for the SLDF for a better part of 15 years to in their portion of the reunification war, their overall military is not decimated. A lot of the conflict is about diplomacy and brinkmanship and politics, and less about sheer firepower and destruction. So unlike the other three Periphery powers, the Rimworld's military remains fairly intact at the end of the reunification war. And because of the tact and the strategy and the tactics that the Amarises pursued, plus downplaying or maybe enhancing the inner sphere's belief in them being a bunch of hicks, allows them to quickly recover their losses from the reunification war and build upon them and benefit from it. So in the 300 years of the Star League, roughly majority of this time, the Amarises over several generations are really beefing up their ability to be a major player. And so when Amaris finally puts his quote plan into action, eliminates Richard Cameron and the Cameron family and declares himself emperor, it's not because he just spent 15 years of genius plotting to overtake the SLD or the Star League and set himself up as an emperor. It's because he's acting on the accumulation of 7 or 8 generations of his forebears who were also plotting and planning for this day. So his forces are veteran and elite, well trained, well equipped, well motivated, highly loyal. He has a very powerful, loyal and commercial and public base in the Rim. It's not until after he becomes emperor and he moves lock, stock, and barrel mostly to Terra and the hegemony, and all but abandons the Rim worlds to their own devices. He's running things through puppets, but that's not as effective as being the charismatic person himself, being present and doing what he needs to do to inspire and lead his people. It's not totally surprising that the Rim worlds finally woke up about the time that the SLDF come in and landed on them with both boots and proceeded to kick the bejesus, the snot out of them. This has also worked for Kerensky's advantage because of all the inner sphere houses, none of them want to support him. That none of them really give him the material resource support or the manpower support he requires to retake the hegemony and to defeat Amaris and put down this coup, this empire. He's forced to utilize what assets he has available to him, which helps further grind down the SLDF from its, in its ability and firepower. But he's forced to turn to these very periphery states that he'd been trying to subjugate just months prior to this. It's in the Rimworld's Republic where he focuses most of his ire and his military on conquering. And it's to the credit of the Star League, the SLDF, that they don't eradicate and destroy the Rimworld's economy, industrial base, and its population in an act of revenge, because they very well could have. The fact that they didn't leaves the Star League at least one place where they have a decent amount of industry, heavy industry, technology, more important, the people that know how to run all this stuff to produce and to manufacture and to replace some of their losses that they're going to need to continue this pursuit to Terra, as well as the munitions and the consumables. You know how much food that a million quote man army in the field is going to require? I mean, that's a lot. You know how much fuel and spare parts. You have thousands of battle mechs. Every one of them is made up of tens of thousands of components, and every one of those components can either wear out, fail, or get destroyed or damaged. You got to be able to take care of that stuff, or you will have nothing in short order. The more technologically advanced something is, the more fragile it is in the long run to all kinds of minor problems and things like this. Take that into account. So this plays out. We see this total transition. The Star League fails. The Golden Age ends. The SLDF packs up and makes its exodus and takes the lion's share of its resources, firepower, and equipment with it, and leaves the Inner Sphere leadership to their own devices. The First Succession War breaks out and just horrifically devastates everybody. It's during that First Succession War in those early stages that the Steiners made a brilliant move by absorbing easily taking over as many of the Rimworld's public worlds as they felt suitably desirable. So they reached in and they grabbed the heart and core of the Rimworlds and absorbed them into the Lyran Commonwealth, and further enhancing their already credible capability for manufacturing, and they're enhancing their economy. Had this happened by a different house, how much things would be different? What if the Rimworlds had been outwards of Karita space, and the Karitas absorbed this and all this manufacturing power and more importantly these technicians and these well-trained individuals, and not decimate, and how much more enhanced and better off would they have been through the entire Succession War period? What about House Davion? What if the Rimworlds had been, if the Terran Concordat or the Magistrate Canopus or the Outworlds Alliance were on par or equal to the Rimworlds in these eras, just how much hugely different would the story be? How much things would have changed in the Inner Sphere? Plus, the complete moral destruction and or dissolution of the Rimworld's Republic is going to remove from the periphery a very potent ally and foe. This frees up the Lyran Commonwealth and portions of the Karitan, the Draconis Combine, from having to deal with yet another periphery power on their borders. So, for the biggest portion, the Lyrans do not have this periphery power poised over their shoulders. We get the Canopus overlooking the Free Worlds League and the Compelling Confederation, and then the Confederation and the Free Worlds, or the Federated Suns, have the Terran Concordat looking over their corner, and then on the opposite side we have the Outworlds Alliance and its somewhat threat to the Federated Suns / the small corner of the Draconis Combine. And then of course the Combine has a whole slew of pirate bases and worlds and stuff spinward from its borders, where we don't see nearly as much of that in what was the rim worlds. So you would think that some of those 30 odd worlds that were not claimed and conquered by the Lyrans or the Draconis Combine in a small number would have seen the rise of becoming bandit worlds or small minute domains of bandit warlords and stuff that are on the verge of becoming an actual political body, like we see in the Marian hegemony and a couple other locations. There's just this dearth, this swath of dead worlds, emptied populations, abandoned everythings, and we don't have an answer totally as to where all that went and what happened to them. And it's not explored because it leaves some open windows. There's also a recent revelation at the end of the story of the clan of Wolverine's destruction. And I wonder, if some of these populations of these missing worlds didn't get relocated by other sources. There's always the possibility, especially in this story-rich, lore-rich, convoluted world that we enjoy as BattleTech, that the possibility that there's yet more powerful entities sitting out beyond the edge of known space, just past the periphery into the far deep periphery that have not been encountered yet, still there. There's still the possibilities of what might be there, and the descendants of the Amarises and the Rimworld republics that didn't get absorbed and didn't get destroyed could have relocated themselves or joined by another entity or organization or something to that effect. We'll never know, and we may never know, and it may just be hyperbole and conjunction and theory and wishful thinking on my part. Anyway, this is Rick, and this has been the Rimworld's Republic. Until next time, you guys have a great weekend.